What up, Morning Manna team? I have been waiting for today. Today is January 6th, and if you have been reading along in the one-year Bible with us, then you have read or will read later on today Genesis chapter 15. Such an interesting passage. We know, we talked about yesterday that in Genesis 12, God tells Abram, hey, I want you to go. So Abram went. Abram goes, and they show up in this land. There's some interaction with Lot. And then in Genesis 15, we're going to see this re-giving of this promise, and God's going to promise Isaac, but it's so incredibly interesting where God says to Abram, he's like, hey, let's make a covenant. So Abram gets a sacrifice, and he cuts the animal in half, and he separates them. And when birds of prey, or maybe not the carrion, they're going to come and try and eat these animals, Abram drives them off, and then he falls into a deep sleep. God's moving, and God shows up and makes this promise. Abram, here's what I'm going to do for you. And his name is now Abraham. And then verse 17, you got this torch and this fire pot that pass through the separated halves of the animals of the sacrifice. But Abraham is still sleeping. I don't have time to teach it all. It'd be wonderful sometime to sit down and talk through all of the elements of the covenant and how these things work. What's significant is this. The two makers of the covenant, God and Abraham, they should pass through these halves of the sacrifice together. They should both be doing work. Here's what I'm going to do, and here's what I'm going to do, and here's how we're going to keep this covenant. But this beautiful picture, it's a pattern we see all through the Bible. God does all the work. Abraham's asleep. The fire pot and the torch, they go through these halves, but it's God. See, I just think that's one of the beautiful things. We talked about this a little bit when we talked about Noah earlier this week. It's one of the beautiful things about God. He does the work. What's needed for you, for salvation in your life, Jesus has already done it. It's always God. We can trust in Him. So if you're in that spot where you're like, man, this hasn't quite gone the way that I want it to, it's God. We can trust in Him. It's always a good idea to turn around and put our trust back in God where we've slipped. Trust Him, follow Him. He does the work. I just love thinking about that as we read through the Bible together. God bless you, Morning Manna. Have a great, great day.